Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, Dr. Patricia Zigarmi, Senior Consulting Partner at Ken Blanchard Companies. She's also their Vice President of Business Development. She is respected for her ability to build trust and to listen, and is a confidential consultant for many Fortune 500 as well as global companies, including Deloitte Development, Harvard Center for Public Leadership, MasterCard, TJ Maxx, Nissan North America, among many others. Books that she had co-authored includes Leadership and the 1 Minute Manager, Leading at a Higher Level, and Who Killed Change. She's also been a principal author in many of the products, including Situational Leadership 2 and Leadership Point of View, Leading People Through Change, and Trustworks, which is what she'll be speaking to us about this evening. Pat received her bachelor's degree in sociology from Northwestern University, as well as her doctorate in leadership and organizational development from the University of Massachusetts. She has taught for over 10 years in the Master's of Science, the Executive Leadership Program at the University of San Diego, and she lives in Solano Beach. But real quick, I want to share a little personal story of how I know Pat. In 2001, Jeff McCulloch and I, at the age of 23, joined the NU Club of San Diego, and we were tasked with putting on the holiday party. As many of you know, putting on an event is nerve-wracking, and we also just won Club of the Year that year, so we had to put on a really good event. And we sat there and said, we need a venue, and Pat was so generous and offered her home, and when you live in Southern California, you can have an outdoor backyard holiday party in December. Who knew? Over the years, Pat and I have stayed in touch. I had a chance to get to know her daughters a little bit when Lisa was applying to colleges. And Pat actually grew up in the same hometown I did, of Grand Rapids, Michigan, which I like to call the eastern suburbs of Chicago. We also have spent some time together when Pat did some presentations on the presidential election in 2008 and leadership styles of the two candidates. And now she's a grandma, and I always say when I grow up I want to be like Pat because she spends her summers in Traverse City, Michigan, and her winters in San Diego, California. So with that, help me give Pat a warm welcome.
I see Kwan way too infrequently, and she always reminds me of how much I'm committed both to this university and to our friendship. So I look forward to sharing some dinner with you tonight and catching up. So it's really cool to be invited to speak at this event. I thought there maybe was one invitation that was sweeter, but I've sort of changed my mind. So let me tell you a little story. When I was applying to undergraduate school, I applied to 3 colleges. I applied to Northwestern, which is where I knew I'd go. My family had gone here. But I also applied to Duke and Stanford. I got into Duke, and I didn't get into Stanford. They turned me down. So fast forward 4 years, and I finished my undergraduate, and I applied to one graduate school, Stanford. Because I really thought I only had to apply to one because I had great grades, and I had really strong leadership skills, and I thought, there's no way Stanford can turn me down. Well, they turned me down again. That led to a whole series of sliding doors, and it's way too long a story to tell, but it was a serendipitous good outcome. So fast forward another maybe 25 years, and I get invited by the Stanford Alumni Association to speak. God, I loved it. I started my speech with, I've always wanted to be one of you. And I thought that was a pretty sweet invitation to have them pay me to speak at a college that had turned me down twice. But this is a much sweeter invitation to speak at the university that I have great fondness for. So thank you for the invitation. I'm going to talk a little bit today about trust. I'm going to talk a little bit about trust. I'm going to talk about the warning signs when there's low authenticity in trust. I'm going to talk about how trust gets broken. I'm going to share a little bit of a model for how you build trust. And I'm going to talk about the benefits of building trust. So I want you to think about 2 things. I want you to think either about your work outside of your club or your club, where you put some energy. And just keep that context kind of the same for the whole presentation. I want to talk a little bit about the warning signs of low trust. So, rumors. When people don't have information, they make it up. I mean, I deal with change all the time. So they make it up, and not only do they make it up, they make it worse. So in your club or in your work, if people don't have information, they're going to create their own reality. They're going to make it up and make it worse. And that gets fueled by secrecy. Secrecy that sort of imputes that there's a hidden agenda. Or worse yet, that there are personal interests that trump organizational interests, that people are in it for their own reasons. I think another sort of cause or warning sign of low trust is aloofness. How many of you work with leaders in your organization or in your club that kind of project an attitude of, I'm better than you? Or they hold themselves apart? Or they're not as sort of forthcoming as you'd like. They're not as authentic as you'd like. I think that aloofness and arrogance, that lack of humility, promotes low trust. A lack of communication or openness also drives low trust. And when you can't influence something, when you're not collaborative, then I think also that your sense of trust or transparency is lowered. I think low engagement, low morale is a sign of low trust. So think about those times when you hold back. Think about those times when you show up but you don't contribute. Think about those times when people in your club kind of let somebody else take the lead. They're not really engaged. They're not really kind of linked in. Think about times when people don't make contributions. They're not creative. They don't take the initiative. They dial down and let somebody else kind of be center stage. I think that lack of innovation or that lack of creativity is also an indicator of low trust and transparency. Slow decision making. I think anytime there's slow decision making in an organization, it probably means that there's low trust. Because I'm not willing to defer. I'm not willing to sort of let the other person take the lead. So I'm going to question authority. And I think the last sign that I want to flag is when there's compliance. What do people do when they're breaking our trust? What are their behaviors? They lie. What else? What?
Narcissism.
Narcissism. So narcissism, if we're going to turn that into a behavior, is probably they put their interest ahead of our organizational interest. They focus only on themselves and how they're going to come out. What else?
Avoids eye contact.
They're secretive in meetings. What?
Avoids eye contact.
They avoid eye contact. They kind of deflect.
Not open.
Not open. So they close. They're closed in terms of sharing information. They don't open decision making to each other, to us. What? They name drop. They violate confidentiality. You're coming.
Your action is a sales pitch.
What? It feels like a sales pitch.
Favoritism.
They play favorites. Yeah, you're either on their good side or their bad side. The problem is that you don't trust people who have favorites, because if you're not the favorite, you don't trust them. But when you become the favorite, you get a little nervous that it won't last. I mean, it works both ways. Okay, some trust-busting behaviors that we've seen is people don't demonstrate expertise. You know, that whole notion of Peter's principle. They get to a position where they really don't have the skills to be in the position. They don't achieve results. They don't get things done. They break confidences, which you already talked about. They lie. They gossip. They don't listen. They don't care. They don't show interest in you as someone who's a colleague. They don't give recognition or share credit. They don't follow through. They're unorganized. And what I didn't hear you talk about too much is they're unreliable. They don't do what they say they're going to do. They break promises. So those are trust-busting behaviors. Now think for a moment, what's the cost of low trust? Just think a bit. What we know from our research is that people don't work as hard. They don't share good ideas. They undermine the person who's making the decisions. They don't give discretionary effort. In organizations today, in clubs that you're part of, discretionary effort is critical. People don't give discretionary effort to people they distrust. Time off tasks increases. Initiative goes down. Goals aren't achieved. Decisions are constantly questioned. Conflict increases. Teamwork decreases. In a study a competitor of ours did, 90% of the employees surveyed considered trust in the workplace to be important. That number was 90%. But only 29% reported high levels of trust. And only 7% agreed with the statement, leaders in my organization look out for my best interests. When trust is high, 58% of people surveyed said they were satisfied with their job. That's not so great, but 58%. When trust is low, only 4% said they were satisfied. Only 3% of employees with low trust look forward to going to work the next day, whereas over 50% who had high trust said, I'm excited to go to work. The costs of low trust, whether that's at work, in a personal relationship, or in your club, are disastrous. So now, another reflection. Picture the person you trust the most in your life. Whether that's a leader or a significant other or a friend, picture the person you trust the most and ask yourself, what do they do? How do they act in relation to you? So just jot down a couple of thoughts. What does a person you trust the most do? All right, what are some of the behaviors of a high trustworthy person? They're predictable. You can count on them to act similarly in similar situations, okay? They share their lives. So another characteristic that came up is they're predictable. They share their lives with me. What else?
They listen.
They listen well. What else?
Authentic.
They're authentic. Now, what's the behavior behind authentic? See, we believe trust is actually a behavioral model.
They don't have to tell you what you want to hear, but they're just authentic.
They don't have to tell you what you want to hear. They'll sort of tell the truth.
They look for win-win situations.
They look for win-win situations.
Cooperation.
They cooperate rather than compete. That means they'll share credit. Yeah.
I screw up once, she's not going to judge me based on that one act. Not better than that.
Right. So if I screw up once, they're not going to be quick to judge. They're going to cut me some slack.
Don't waste time.
They don't waste time.
Always.
They're available always. See, yeah?
Stronger than these, I think the person I trust the most is first. Or
Ah.
possessors.
Okay.
Not
So
just the fear, gives you my word.
the person I trust the most puts me first. A trustee, putting the interest of others first. And it's evidenced in their behaviors. They defer about their own needs, their own interests, their own desires. How are you different with this person than with a person with low trust? What happens back?
Full engagement.
Full engagement.
More open.
More open, more self-disclosing.
You want to do things for them back.
You want to do things back. You want to be reciprocal. You want to strengthen it even more. So when I was introduced about 8 years ago now to the ABCD model, which is so simple, and I'm going to teach it to you right now, I believed it explained every distrustful relationship I'd had in my life and every trustworthy relationship I had in my life. So I'm going to share it with you pretty quickly. I am going to give you a handout, so you don't really need to take any notes, but I actually think this is a kind of game-changing model. So in our model, there are 4 elements of trust, A, B, C, D. A is demonstrate competence. So leaders who are perceived as skillful at what they do are given trust. So just hold this up to the person you trust the most. Synonyms for able are skillful, knowledgeable, technically competent. Picture a person who's able. They get results. They have enough technical expertise to help others or to mentor. So think about your trustworthy person. Do you trust their ability? Do you trust their competence? Do you think that they're able and skillful and knowledgeable? We can have, okay, can you hand those out now? It's fine. Okay, B. B is act with integrity. So B is often where people go when they think about trust. But B is act with integrity. Picture a person with a high B who acts as a role model for the values of a company or an organization, or of Northwestern, if that's the focus you have. Synonyms for believable are credible, honest, ethical. When someone's believable, he or she tells the truth, holds confidences, is honest about her skills or his skills, and gives credit when credit's due. So believable is the second criteria. C is connected, and you talked about it. They share their lives with me. A person who has high C is concerned about others. They care. They communicate well. Someone who's connected shares praise easily. They value others' contributions. They're compassionate, people-focused, relationship-focused. And finally, the D is dependable. Someone who's high in D can be counted on to do what they say they're going to do. They're reliable. They keep their promises. They're usually responsive. And finally, they're organized enough to get back to you. So I was thinking about my week this week as I was getting ready to do this little presentation. And this is the third time I've spoken this week. But my hardest day wasn't Monday or Wednesday or today. My hardest day was Tuesday, when I took care of my little 17-month-old grandchild, Evelyn. I mean, I was dead by the end of that day. 6 hours of a 17-month-year-old, like, whoa. I really did a bunch of stuff, too, that broke her trust. I mean, I was thinking about this model on the plane. I was thinking, I wasn't very competent. Like, I hadn't baby-proofed my house, so I was constantly chasing after her to, get her to not go into cupboards she shouldn't have been going to. I definitely wasn't as skillful at feeding her as her mom was. I really wasn't very fair in terms of the way I worked with her, in that I made her eat her vegetables, and we weren't leaving the little high chair until she did it, and she looked at me as if like, that's not how my mom deals with me. We weren't that connected. I mean, I don't see her all that often. And I could see that little, like, who are you exactly? Like, and why are you doing this? And then I was thinking about dependability. I really wasn't organized very well to be as dependable or as reliable as I need. She can sign. She can do about 60 signs. So she goes like this, and I'm going, what's that? Like, that means cracker. God, I didn't know that. So that notion of actually creating the conditions where you can be able, believable, connected, and dependable are what build trust. So which element is most important to you in building trust? When you think about your trustworthy relationships, which element's most important to you? How many of you think it's A? I really want to work with someone who is competent. See, it often's the neglected one. There's only one person in the room. It's often the neglected element. But I actually think if I asked you to think about working with someone who was low on competence, you'd bristle. You wouldn't find it rewarding. You wouldn't find it trust building. What about B? How many of you think it's believability, the credibility, the ethics? Okay, a lot of you raised your hands on that. How about the C? They need to be connected. A fair measure of you. And how many for dependability? That's actually my number one, I think, in some ways. It's like, if people don't do what they say they're going to do, if they overcommit and don't follow through, that's a real trust buster with me. So turn to the person next to you and explain why you chose the letter you chose. Let me just take a few minutes and make this a little bit more complicated before I just wrap it up. So I think it's helpful to know A, B, C, and D. Would you agree?
Yes.
I mean, it's useful to say, how do I break somebody's trust? Oh, me? Oh, me? Like, I might not engage in all these behaviors all of the time, that are trust building. I actually might be a trust buster occasionally. Oh my God, I didn't get that project done when I said I was going to do it. Oh my God, I didn't make the calls that I said I was going to make. Oh my God, I walked into work today and didn't connect with people. I just went so focused to getting my job done, so task-oriented, that I failed to even acknowledge people. I mean, let's be honest, we engage in some of these behaviors some of the time that erode trust. We do them, not just the other person does them. So let me just share with you a couple of sub-dimensions of each of these A, B, C, D elements. So ability, it's not just as simple as being able. We think there's actually three categories. You have expertise. People trust you as an expert. They see you as a go-to person who can mentor, coach, train, lead. You also get the job done. We'd much rather work for someone who gets results, who does what they say they're going to do, exceeds expectations, than for somebody who says, here's what I'm going to do, and they never quite get there. And then facilitation skills is really interesting. We trust the person who can move things through the system, who knows kind of who to go to, who knows how to make the systems work, who knows how to get things done, who knows how to run a good meeting, who knows how to make, voicemail and email and virtual meetings work. We trust people who can facilitate getting things done. So when you think about showing people that you're able, you need to show them your expertise. You need to show them that you have a track record of getting things done. And you have to show them that you can make the systems work. Let's look at believable. Believable is three parts also. Most of you glomped on to the B. And B is really important because it is the honesty. It's the not lying. It's the telling the truth. But two others are really important. It's not just honesty. It's really commitment to living the organization's values. Commitment to living what you say is important. It's reducing the gap between words and deeds, between words and actions. It's literally finding where the common ground is in the values of the people that you're trying to lead and meeting them there. So being authentic to your values, but also being authentic to the organization's values, being honest about the organization's values and acting them day in and day out. And finally, the last one, I'd almost put an asterisk on it because our research is saying it's so important for those of you who are in work organizations, in companies. Fair process is one of the biggest trust busters around. And fair process means I don't believe that the leader or leaders in this organization give recognition, promotion, credit, opportunity based on a fair process. So the minute the process is unfair, believability goes down and distrust goes up. We would almost put an asterisk on it. People want to see that there's both procedural justice as well as distributive justice. So procedure is that the system works, and distributive justice is that if I work hard, I get paid differently than somebody who sloughs off. C is connected, and I have to say, when I look back at my 30 years of leading in Blanchard, this is probably the one I'd have to sort of notch. Here we are, a relationship-oriented company. We're really about working with people we love and respect. And I would say this is the one that I sometimes short-circuited. This is about people focus. This is about really demonstrating caring. This is about over-communicating. And this is about sharing credit, giving recognition, acknowledging contributions, valuing people for what they do. So connected is three things: people focus, caring, communication, and giving recognition. And finally, dependability is the last, the D, and it has three components as well. It's responsiveness. Do you get back to people when they send you a request? Do you kind of hear them and respond in a kind of timely manner? How many of you get a gazillion emails every day and voicemail? Less voicemail, probably text and email. The question is, when do you get back? What is the discipline you have, which is the last criteria, in order to be able to be responsive? So responsiveness is one dimension. The other dimension is accountability. Do you hold yourself and others accountable? I think about the umpteen team meetings I go to where people don't show up having done the work they said they were going to do. And it's kind of like we work around, rather than put it out on the table and say, hey, Kwan. It wouldn't be Kwan, but hey, Kwan. Like that was a commitment we made. It has to make a difference that people do what they say they're going to do. And finally, the last one is organized. Are you organized enough? It's a funny one. I thought, is organization skills a trust building activity? But I think it is a trust building or trust busting activity. If you're not organized enough to be responsive, if you can't retrieve stuff, if you can't find electronic files, if you can't find critical information and bring it to bear on the decision making, then I think in effect you're again going to act in ways that lower trust. Turn to the person next to you and say, which one of those is most surprising to me as a dimension? What of the 1 to 12 on there is most surprising as a component that could both build and erode trust? Okay, which of the ones are most surprising? Just shout out a couple of numbers so I can hear. 6. 6 is 12. Yeah, 12 is interesting. If you can't access that information, that data, if you don't have a filing system that works, if you have a messy desk, if you have electronic files that aren't organized, if you don't manage your contacts well, if you don't manage your voicemail well, if you don't manage your text response, if you don't have organizational systems in place, hire a personal assistant. I mean, hire somebody to get you organized because it's critical. I mean, if you can't do it, you have to supplement it, and that's the only way you're going to show up being trustworthy. I heard 6. 6 is, I think, a killer in organizations. If you can't manage the process fairly and end up with rewards or recognition or credit that makes sense in terms of level of contribution, it's an immediately a toxic, trust-busting environment. What else? Any others that surprised you? Okay. So just to think about it, I think that this is really powerful because it's a common language to understand trust, to talk about trust, and to build trust in a relationship. So I was thinking about an executive team that I worked with recently. And Eduardo said to me, I just don't trust Jay at all. And so I did a little query about kind of where does he break trust? And Eduardo, who was Latin American, from Latin America, said, he doesn't build any relationships. I mean, he's not at all connected to me. I mean, I gotta talk before. I gotta build some common ground here. I gotta know something about the person and what they do before I can get down to business. I know it's a big aspect of doing business in a relationship-oriented culture, like most of the countries are in South America. And I said to Jay, why don't you have a trust-building relationship with Eduardo? He's great. He's a fabulous guy to go have a drink with. I mean, it's just wonderful because he never does what he says he's going to do. He never follows through. He never meets the deadlines that we've, co-created, that we've agreed upon. Now it was really interesting because when we looked at the 12 dimensions, they actually kind of connected on 75% of them. They actually had the basis for high trust, but there were things they had to tweak to be a little bit more relationship-oriented, a little bit more connected, a little bit more vulnerable about personal life, and a little bit more committed to follow through in order to just notch that trustfulness gauge up a little in their relationship. So I want you to think as I sort of wrap up here, where are the relationships that rather than saying the other person is distrustworthy or untrustworthy, where are the relationships where there's low trust and you need to do something different? You need to tweak it a little bit. You need to make a little bit of an adjustment and potentially a request for the other person to be a little different. I gave you a little questionnaire so that you can actually look at your trustworthiness on the plane home. And you can look for what are 1 or 2 things that I could do that I rated hardly ever or sometimes. Now, my suggestion when you take this assessment is that you be honest with yourself. For one, it's one of the B characteristics, but it might give you some sort of feedback as to what you might be able to do differently. What I believe deeply is trust is the core element that impacts both team leadership and potentially your club's effectiveness. Because that lack of trust, that low trust leads to low believability and connection, leads back again to low trust. So I'm just going to finish by sharing a couple of stats with you about the benefits of having a culture of high trust. So Watson Wyatt study found that companies where employees had high trust and confidence in senior management had a 3-year total return to shareholders of 108% versus 66% for companies with low trust and confidence in senior leadership. The Atlanta Consulting Group studied the correlation between trust and profitability. In divisions that outperformed others, 84% of the survey respondents said they had high levels of trust. In the underperforming units, the level of trust was at 27%. So trust works, is one of the things I'm trying to say. In an article in HBR by Tony Simmons, they studied Holiday Inns, and this was just really interesting, where employees felt managers followed through on their promises and had high behavioral integrity. They pinpointed the link in those behaviors to a 2.5% increase in profitability, which at the properties that were rated high on trust meant $250,000 to the bottom line every year. So trust counts, it pays off. And what I really want you to do is to think about what you're going to do to increase the level of trust and therefore openness, productivity, engagement, retention, and endorsement in the organizations that you lead. Thank you.